No, not yet. Want to make sure your kids weren't killing each other first.
Oh, they probably will still. God will sort it out. It's all good. Parenting 101, folks.
Just throw a knife in the middle of the room and see what happens.
No, because then you become an accessory to murder, and
Nice. All right, so Brad, should I do the thing?
Gosh, sure, man. Whatever you have planned.
I was talking about what we talked about last night, the slogan.
Okay, let's do it.
All right, folks.
I'm scared.
You should be. All right, folks. Welcome back to another episode of Skirmish Supremacy. Tonight we are joined by Brad and Josh. Brad is actually one of the co-owners of Reformation Brewery, and Josh is a fellow podcaster himself and also has a new up-and-coming company called Weekly Games. But first, because Brad said I could do it, this episode of Skirmish Supremacy is brought to you by Reformation Brewery, your beer for your gaming nights. Woo! That's right.
Excellent.
Sponsorship, bitches.
The goal has been achieved.
We win. We're the best podcast out there.
Brought to you by beer.
Brought to you by beer. Awesome. So tonight we are going to be floating on topics a little bit. One of the big things that we actually have been talking about quite a bit, and it's been kind of I don't want to say a broken conversation, but definitely one that we've kind of had in bits and pieces a little bit here and there. Every night that we have the Reformation game nights over at Reformation Brewery, they do those the second Tuesday of every month for those of you that are local here in Georgia. Starts 6:30 to 9:30. Obviously, you go in, you can get your beer, play games, bring games to play. Josh has been doing a fantastic job at setting up some themes. But one of the big things that we've really kind of talked about is the change in the trend of the people that are playing games. And it's not just board games, but role-playing games. And it's starting to float a little bit into miniatures. Miniatures can be a little challenging with that, but it's just we're noticing a flip-flop in the way that things are done in the industry. So without further ado, Brad, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, like you said, I'm one of the investing partners at Reformation Brewery. By day, I run a real estate brokerage, and by night, I enjoy growing a brewery and helping my brother and his friends get that started.
Fantastic. And how long have you been a gamer?
Gosh, I've been a gamer my whole life, a short answer, but I got serious about gaming really in college. It started with a role-playing game of Dungeons and Dragons, and from there, I graduated to more mature board gaming, and gosh, for the last 20 plus years, I thought it was my private little secret hobby until I discovered how many others shared the same passion, and there's just a huge community that I'm just excited to be a part of, and to see that community growing now is really exciting.
Yeah, it's definitely a big shift in the culture. You know, I even still remember from, me growing up where it's like, oh, I played D&D. I was like the closet nerd. I couldn't tell anybody I did it. It's like if I did, then people looked at me weird.
Oh, I remember that moment. And, being in college, and I'll show my age now, I think the first public coming out moment was Weezer's song when he sang about having a Dungeon Master guide. That's probably back in the early 90s. And I was like, oh, no, he's singing about Dungeons and Dragons. Like, oh, no, I'm going to be outed now.
Nice. And Josh, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Great. I'm Josh Weekly. I am the event coordinator, if you will, for the Reformation game nights that we host on the second Tuesday of every month. I'm also, as Tim said, a podcaster myself. And I'm now officially, as of a couple weeks, a month or so ago, a small business owner as well. I am trying to start up a what we call in the tech world a disruptive business in the analog gaming.
Well, he's disruptive.
Yeah. No.
Or he got disrupted.
That was just a really awkward pause, either one.
Oh, okay. Excellent. All right. Well, we'll work with that. So he's going to be doing something a little bit unique in the analog gaming world, which we'll kind of talk about that tonight. We'll kind of roll it into everything that we're talking about with this. But I guess to kind of get on track a little bit. So how did the game night start? Because I did not jump in from the beginning. So was that something, Josh, that you and Brad talked about a little bit? And how long did it take for it to become a thing?
Started game nights a little over 2 years ago, and the impetus for, or the origin story for game nights of Reformation Top Day. I had been friends with Spencer, which is, I cannot hear. I apologize. And also one of the co-owners at Reformation, and had learned of Brad, and we got together and we learned of this common hobby that we had of board games and gaming in general. And I hit Brad up and said it would be great if we could do an event at the brewery for Tabletop Day. This was in 2015. And I was expecting, and Brad probably had more visions of it than I did, but at that time, I was expecting, a couple of people to show up, and we had a very, very healthy attendance that night. And from that night forward, Brad and I said, we need to be doing this, be a regularly occurring thing, and connecting people together, and with the grand and fantastic brews that are happening at Reformation. So it was I think a joining of common visions most than anything else.
Gotcha.
Yeah,
okay.
yeah. It was about the time that the brewery was just starting to grow. The brewery was in its infant stage that first year in 2014, and it really didn't have a public tasting room until the end of 2014. So spring of 2015, when Josh and I got together to do that International Tabletop Day, it was really one of the first times that the community would even gather at the brewery in the public tasting room. So it was just a fun way to, throw a community-focused event and share our passion of games. And it's really grown. And we've been doing it now every month for over a year plus, and it continues to grow. And I thank Josh for the relationship that's grown out of it too. Josh even spends some times in my basement just gaming, he and I. So
nice. So obviously we all know about basement gaming. We've all done it in some way, shape, or form through our lives, especially if you've been a Dungeons and Dragons player or any RPG. The basement was the place that you played. So that was always the common thing.
That cliche, man, guys hanging out in the basement and playing games is real. That's why the cliche exists. But what's great is to see that become so much more of a social experience and a way to connect, not only with people like you, but strangers and neighbors in the community. It's really been special to be a part of.
Yeah, it's I jumped in. Oh, I don't know. You guys were probably doing it 6-8 months before I first started showing up. Maybe.
Yeah, sounds about right.
And then, I came in there and I started, playing a lot of the games and realized that this wasn't just some checkers and shoots and ladders, that they were playing, I guess you want to call them the hardcore games, the legit games. I hate using that term because I'm never going to tell people how they can and cannot have fun. But,
right.
That was the first time that I saw it. It's like, oh, wow, this is for lack of better terms, this is something that a lot of game stores wish that they could pull off. And I hate saying it that way, but it's very, very true. Board game night in most game stores does not have nearly as successfully as what it does at Reformation.
Yeah, I think a lot of it, there's so much symmetry that I found in I'll call it independent movement of craft beer and the independent movement of board games. I think they are blossoming at a similar time in our culture for similar reasons. The ability to actually sit across the table from someone and have real analog off the grid kind of conversation and interaction is meaningful in this world when we're so connected to digital devices all the time. And you can do that over a beer and you can do that over a game. And to combine those both together, it's been a perfect fit. And that's why we have the attendance and growth we've had.
Right. Yeah. And I would definitely agree with that. And Josh, something you mentioned the other night that kind of, caught my attention is we were talking, obviously at this point, it's no secret that I work in the gaming industry. I've never once hid that fact from our list. Something you said to me the other night is that you were talking with a lot of people for the last few months. And Brad, I know you were probably in on this conversation too, just talking to people that a vast majority of the people that show up to that game night do not buy their games at brick and mortar traditional hobby stores.
I would venture to say that at least percent of the people who come to our game nights do not attend, frequent, or have ever even set foot into a friendly local game store.
Okay. And have you ever like dug into why they haven't?
It definitely does vary between individual to individual. A common theme that most people express is the ability, the accessibility of these game stores. They feel very, very targeted toward what a lot of people feel is a stereotypical gaming individual. You know, the bad social skills, the bad hygiene. You know, we all know the stereotypical things that are associated with these game stores, and unfortunately, in a lot of cases, they're true. And so, again, these people are not buying their games at the game stores. They're not going to play the games at the game stores, and I don't even know if half of them know 5 of the game stores in the area.
Right. And I would venture to say the same after talking with a lot of the people. So, you know, it's funny because we have this talk a lot at my day job about like the current trend of your local game store. And we've been talking about it a lot the last few months, you know, especially, you know, for those of you that haven't really been paying attention to the board gaming side of the industry, or even like the moves that have been made within the industry where, you know, Osmodee Fantasy Flight, you know, Osmodee North America, as we know it here in the States, are obviously the giant of gaming. And they have, you know, they started with like separating, like, you know, this is online retail versus brick and mortar retail and doing their best to support both, down to they pared down to like 5 choice distributors out of the dozen that we have in the United States. And now they're exclusive with Alliance. And now that leaves a lot of people like scrambling to find other things. And throughout all of that, local game stores taking hits on things, and the availability is not always there. And in a way, it hasn't allowed them to adapt with the way that there's been a lot of changes within, you know, your traditional function of buying games, I guess is the best way to put it. So accessibility of games, because of, you know, platforms like Amazon and Cool Stuff Inc. and a lot of these online retailers have really helped bump that to the forefront. And then, of course, they are being sold into big box stores such as Target and Walmart and Barnes & Noble's carrying games. And these are stores that, you know, for lack of a better term, the muggles like to frequent, and that's where they start picking them up. So it's changing the mentality of the way that people play their games. However, it again, like you said, Josh, it still leads to that I guess stereotype that if you go to a game store, it's going to be dirty. There's going to be a bunch of, you know, stinky, unwashed nerds and, you know, everything else that goes along with it, bad social skills. And that for a lot of people, even though they want to get into gaming, is still looked at as a major turnoff to trying to get into it.
Yeah, I think from what I can tell, based on listening to the conversation and seeing the behavior of the people who've been attending game night at the brewery, is all of those things you guys have said, but it really boils down to intimidation factor and that fear of the unknown, because they've never been there and they've never, you know, thought about going there. They're intimidated. They don't want to come off as stupid or not understanding. And, you know, it's not because the guy behind the counter is stinky or gross or whatever. It's like, he just knows way more than me and I'm going to sound stupid and I'm intimidated by that. Yeah, it's a lot easier to just order online or, you know, even talk about games at a brewery instead of being intimidated going into this. Like, these people know everything about everything.
Yeah, and that is another factor on it too. You know, I've talked with a lot of people that were just getting into gaming, and they're like, "Yeah, I go into the local game store, and it's like every single person behind that counter is a veritable library of information," and they're looking at it going, "Look, I just graduated from Monopoly yesterday." So let's tone that back. Tell me what's kind of like the next step up from Monopoly, you know, or, you know, that's usually the way it's kind of looked at.
Let's be honest. That game is Machikaro, and no one should be playing Machikaro.
I wasn't going to say it, but hey, whatever. So I think that's the big thing too, is that especially with party games, and I guess if you want to call them rules light games becoming far more popular, a lot of those games are allowing people to bridge that gap between, your Monopoly, your Chutes and Ladders, and like some of your heavy stuff like Twilight Imperium, and for those of you that haven't so long that takes you to play. So when you guys started the Reformation game night, was it primarily like gamers that happen to drink beer that came in and really started getting involved? Or was it, when you did it, was it kind of one of those things you posted it and then it was more of the curious people coming out of the woodwork?
I would say it's definitely more the curious people, who are interested in, getting together with neighbors or people in the community and strangers and connecting over what feels a little more common in beer, but curious about exploring these new games and just meeting people. I think it comes down to people are social animals and they want to be around other people. And this is a great opportunity to do something, I think, in a comfortable environment that they felt safe going to, and familiar probably is a better word than safe, to go and try out this new exploration of games. Yeah.
Because let's face it, like Nick and I go to Gigabytes a lot, and I'm just imagining like someone who's just trying to get into games walking into Gigabytes, especially on a Friday night when we've got fully painted armies of miniatures going on tables and tape measure, and that can look to be quite the spectacle for those that aren't used to that kind of thing. So, yeah,
we should give a shout out. We should give a shout out to David real quick, because David, you're the man.
The store in the area. So
very much so.
He does a lot for us. We go on there, we record stuff, we pull our normal shenanigans, and then we all have fun doing it. But so with the games that have been played there now, like obviously it probably started off with a little bit of the lighter stuff. Josh, how did you go about like obviously Tabletop Day, they throw a big variety of stuff at you. Like Brad was saying, it's a lot more of the curious. So what did you guys do to bridge that gap? Because I know, like, after knowing you guys personally, we like heavier, crunchy games. Like, if it was the four of us sitting down playing a game, we'd have no problem taking a game that takes 3 hours and sitting down and cracking it out. But you can't do that with everybody.
Well, I poked fun at Machikar a little bit ago, but the best game you have on the shelf is the game that you get to play. If you never get to play the game, then it's really, I don't know what it is. It's just taking up space in your domicile. So I think what is great about the game nights is there are people who are curious are coming, and then they get to play games that they may not have played before. So we definitely tend to gravitate towards the more accessible games, though theming the nights to introduce people to some of the heavier, more crunchy, if you will, game mechanics. This year we've had worker placement, we've had area control, and we are featuring games that people then can, if they've not played before. And I'm going to throw this out there, just as as a gamer myself. I was entirely hesitant to play worker placement games until we had worker placement night at the brewery. And I played Lords of Waterdeep for the first time the week before that, so I could teach it and demo it to people. And that game is literally amazing. Worker placement games, believe the hype, people. Believe the hype. They're real.
I love Lords of Waterdeep, though. Actually, I've only played the video game, the tablet version of it.
I've not done that, but I'm sure it's amazing.
It definitely is just a fun game. I liked it.
It's better across the table with a beer in your hand.
That would definitely be true.
Even last night, Tim, you were there in attendance, and we did area control for our theme. And one of the games that we had demoed and we were playing was the new Godfather game that Eric Lang designed, which I think definitely straddles the line between introductory game and crunchy, because there's a lot of things happening. You've got bidding, you've got area control, you've got worker placement, you've got a lot. You've got take that type mechanics, and I feel like the players we had around the table were doing a fantastic job of picking that game up pretty quickly.
Yeah, they were doing a fantastic job of that. Like, I know that the first turn of the game, well, it's like that with any game where there's a lot of setup like that. It sometimes takes 10 minutes to explain to everybody what to do. But once they get to that first round, like after that first round, we all kind of knew right off the bat what we needed to do. And we even knew like how to like stab each other in the back, how to extort one another, how to take advantage of situations. You know, and of course, we're playing the Godfather. So, I mean, let's face it, nobody in the game's a good guy. So everybody around the table is out for themselves. Everybody at the table is out to screw somebody else because it's all about having the most money at the end of the game. So it didn't take long for people to catch on to what was going on. Now, obviously, you know, if you look at it from, I guess, if you want to call it the core gamer mentality, that there's a lot of depth behind the game and you start to kind of learn your strategy and your pattern. But even if you didn't dive into it that deeply, you know, trying to look at it, I guess, competitively, people still got it. And they started figuring out right away how to make it work. So that to me was. Oh, go ahead.
I was going to say I definitely agree. That was a fantastic moment just to see varying levels of gaming experience come together and play a game like that. And it was just so much fun. Even when you're getting gunned down and you're floating in the Hudson, you're still having fun.
Yes, because it's just funny because you're just laying miniatures on their side on the board on the Hudson River, which after a while it just looks hilarious. But it was great fun that way. So, Brad, obviously you were a big RPGer. I know that there have been some RPGs that have been played there, but has that been something that you've been really wanting to push for a little bit more as an intro to people? You know, you being kind of, I guess you want to call it the closet role player for the longest time, that you've been wanting to now kind of say, look, world, this exists.
Yeah, I'm still, I don't know how to describe it. Like, self-conscious about it is probably the right word. Like, I'm still not really ready to come out and proclaim my RPG geekiness to everyone. But I'm getting better about it. I'm talking about it now to you, which is, I feel like, a big step for me.
Especially since it's being recorded, it'll be
happening. Yeah, I know. Now the pressure. Now I'm really nervous about it. But yeah, I mean, I think actually Josh is a good example. So like, I've always played RPGs and board games, and over the last year and a half of doing this board game night with Josh and I developed a really good friendship. We played a ton of board games together. And only recently has Josh joined my table at Dungeons and Dragons. And he came over and watched a session one time to get a feel for it and started talking to me. And then we came over and ran a quick session with his kids. And now I think it's going to be a thing. And I think if that works for me and Josh, I think it's going to work for everyone else who attends game nights. It's just more to explore and another way to enjoy gaming together. And
congratulations,
I think we will,
Josh.
Yeah, I think we will introduce it to the group. And Josh and I are talking about ideas of how to do that effectively and to make it valuable to the attendees and not come off as that weird closet RPGer.
I think that's a great example of what we were talking about earlier, where Brad, you were saying that sometimes what's off-putting about these gaming experiences, like going into a traditional game store, is the intimidation factor. And for me, RPGs have been the most intimidating thing that I could think of when I was wanting to play a game. And not after the experiences that I've had with Dungeons and Dragons, I can't imagine a life without RPGs at this point. And so I want to remove any barriers to entry for anyone else. And I know Brad and I are both passionate about wanting to have this experience accessible to anyone who would want to, because one of the most difficult things about starting an RPG is having a game master, a dungeon master. So just also on the side note, Brad is a fantastic dungeon master.
Good to know.
Thanks, Josh. Well, I was going to game night myself and meeting people over the past year, and I don't know, 7-8 months ago, we're at a game night at the brewery, and I see a table running Dungeons and Dragons 5th edition. And I hadn't played Dungeons and Dragons in over a decade. I think the last time I played was 3.5. And I get so excited when I see a player's handbook and a Dungeon Master guide on a table at game night. So the first thing I do is walk over there and I'm like, hey guys, I really appreciate you coming to game night. What brought you out? I get to know them. And it wasn't a few months later till I joined one of their sessions, and Dungeon Master Lee is an amazing Dungeon Master. And he got me passionate again, hooked back into the D&D with the 5th edition. And that's when Josh and I started connecting over it. And I just want to share that same experience because I think the new 5e is glorious. It's simple, it's straightforward, it's approachable, it's not too rules heavy. And I think those who used to RPG and gave up on it from all the changes and iterations went through may want to come back. And those first timers who've never experienced it should get an opportunity to see, how a collaborative story making game can be so rewarding for both the game master, dungeon master, whatever you want to call them, and the players themselves. And that's experience I'm excited to deliver the game night attendees.
Yeah, I think it could be done. I know that there was one time I ran Numenera there, and I had, 8 people around that table? I think that was where I maxed out, was 8 people. I was like, okay, any more than that, it's going to get a little nutty, and I want everybody to kind of have their, quote-unquote screen time. So, and I think that was my first experience is when I ran Numenera that night, just because I was like, you know what? People need to know that Monty Cook is doing other stuff other than the stuff he did for 3.0 and 3.5. And, Cypher System is one of my personal favorites in the RPG system. So I was like, this is a great way to get people into a game that's not Dungeons and Dragons. And it's a simple rule system. And I had a lot of people that joined around the table that night that knew of RPGs and have never played before. And there's actually been some people that, they picked up RPGs almost immediately afterwards.
Yeah, I agree. I love that. And I remember you running it that night. And I was excited because I didn't know Monty Cook did anything since 3.5. So that was cool for me to experience. But to see everyone around that table, of your 8, I think 3 of them were under 10 years old.
Yeah, and they got it.
And they got it. And they were playing right away. They had no idea what the rules were. They didn't even understand what a D12 was. But they were having a blast and were in the moment of making stories together. I think that's the magic of an RPG.
Yes, dice aside, rules aside, just being in that moment together, making a collaborative story.
Mm-hmm.
The dice are just there to say, "Hey, I did this thing. Did I make it or not?" So, right. That's really the ultimate mechanic behind it. So, but kind of looping everything back in. We've had a lot of the different games, and for the longest time, the game night was, I don't want to say disjointed. It was just kind of like show up and play whatever. But over the course of what has it been, the last 2 or 3 months, Josh, you started putting in place you could still play whatever you want to, but we're now having a theme. Josh may or may not be there.
The themes have been fantastic. Yeah. That came out of a conversation you and I had, Tim. We were talking about, just like you said, one of the board gaming is you can easily venture into collecting because you can buy all these cool games. You can get caught up in the cult of the new, and you always want that new hot. But then you bring that stack, and then you multiply that by however many people are coming to game night. And then what you end up with is a bunch of individuals, who brought a stack of games and they want to play them. And sometimes that happens, maybe once or twice, but, it can be disappointing. So one of the things you and I talked about was if we could add a theme, add a little bit of structure to the game nights, we could then encourage people to bring certain types of games. And then also, most importantly, have featured games and encourage people to play a game they maybe have not played before or would not have played.
Right. Because there's a lot of people out there that, they get stuck on one certain kind of game, and it may not be just because they don't like a certain type of game, but it's just they've had nobody else that has been available to play that game. So for them to try something new is always a good thing. Me personally, I don't play a lot of area control games. So last night doing The Godfather, and, games similar to that. Like, to me, that was me, I guess, stepping out of my usual element of gaming, and I still had a blast.
That's exactly what we want to hear. And that's what we're hearing from more people is from the attendees at Game Night is, I would not have tried this, or this is outside of my normal comfort zone, the worker placement in you with area control. But I think the testament to Game Night itself and also board games in general is that the game is often just a conduit for the social interaction, whether it be with new friends or old friends. But the games themselves are what allow that to happen. And I think that's the most amazing thing about board games and what I love about Game Night.
Yes. And again, it comes down to, like Brad was saying, that face-to-face with people. In the digital age, that is something that's lost. And there's a lot of people that want to bring it back. So.
Yeah. I was going to say, I really like, I agree with everything you guys are saying, but I think Josh has done an amazing job with his connection to the industry, including yourself, Tim, to network, to bring really amazing people in the industry, be it at the, distributor side, wholesaler, the game store side, now with Josh, to the designers and makers of the games themselves have been at our game night, whether it was Steve Avery at Tada or the guys out of Athens, Colin Maddox, who've done Control and just kickstarted Campy Creatures. Like, to have those guys attend our game nights and for the non-gamer community to be able to interact with people in the industry directly over a beer and playing a game side by side with them, or even doing a play test on one of their new games that they brought with them, that's an amazing experience that I know some of the friendly local game stores haven't even been able to create. And for us to be able to do that is a testament to the quality of people we have that really care about making a great experience for the attendee. And I want to thank Josh and you too, Tim, for making that happen.
Oh yeah, anytime. I have every intention to keep doing it, but and again, I think a lot of that just falls back into what we were talking about, that when we're talking about it, it's a lot easier for people to unwind and relax. They go to a brewery not to be intimidated. They go to a brewery to drink beer and socialize. And, when you just take that aspect and now you're throwing in something that, at the end of the day is still a social aspect, which is board gaming, it is a perfect fit to make. And so it is a good blend. And I think that it's something that could very well catch on, globally, if we want to go that far and, start seeing it happen in multiple different towns.
Well, I will say real quick, because earlier this year I was fortunate enough to travel to London with my beautiful wife. And while we were there, I had a very specific thing I wanted to do, and that was go to London's very first board game cafe. It's called Droughts. It's a very cool little place to go to. And I'm thinking it's a Wednesday night. I don't need to do anything other than show up. And I get there a little bit before they open, and I'm literally told that they have every single table reserved. And they only have 2 tables set aside for walk-ins, and I may not get a table. And my mind was literally blown that, this place was packed. And so speaking of the global market or the global appetite for this type of environment, it is definitely there. And it exists. And I think, the board game industry needs to adapt into that mentality.
Yeah. And, that's something that we talked about quite a bit, just face to face. And I know Nick and I have talked a little bit about it, either face to face or even mentioned it with some of our previous guests on the show, that the industry as a whole is changing. It's because of the fact that it's becoming so much more accessible to get your hands on games, and it's becoming so much more of a cultural norm. Again, it changes the way that people look at how they have to go about getting their games or where they have to play their games. The traditional game store model isn't the be all and end all of what goes on. That what you just mentioned is a prime example of that. I know that there's some places in upstate New York, like Uncommon Grounds is a coffee shop that happens to also have, a heavy influence in board games, and they kill it. Again, their primary business is coffee, but their draw is the fact they get so many people that come in and play board games that it keeps them filled all the time. So I think it's a change in the way that, people are looking at it. With board games becoming the norm, you're going to start seeing that in a lot more of the your typical social places that you're just used to seeing people sit around and talk. So that's my 2 cents on it anyway. Nick, I know you haven't really said too much on this topic, and we've talked quite a bit about the way that game stores are handled, but what's your input on all of this?
So actually I've only made it out, even though I now live closer than Tim does to Reformation. I've only managed to make it out to one. And I had fun. Actually, I liked it because just before I headed out, I checked my mailbox and I had a new game from Osprey sitting in there to take out and trial, and went there and played a few rounds, and there was a few different people that are like, "Ooh, what's this game? I've never seen it before." And I'm like, "Yeah, I know."
It's not even out yet.
That part was fun, but it was also, people were just like, "Ooh, what is this game? I want to see it. Can I play?" And so we got a few rounds of that in. And some other games, and it definitely was fun. Beer always makes it better.
Always.
It is a vibrant atmosphere. Now, I will say I have pretty much nonstop been carrying Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Shadows of the Past, or whatever the game is, from IDW, in the back of my car in plans of every second Tuesday of every month going and setting up and playing some of that at Reformation. And I have been let down pretty much every time because either I haven't made it out or there was other games people wanted to play.
So there we go, Josh. That's the next one, is the cooperative gaming night. Because games like that, like Zombicide, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, it's always, we have to cooperate against the board to win.
Well, so with Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, you actually play. There's one player who plays the bad guys.
Oh yeah, that's right. I forgot. There is that one guy that is the jerk, and it's like that in a lot of other games out there too. It's, I guess the best way to look at it is kind of a D&D light.
Yeah, and the player playing the bad guys is playing kind of like the dungeon master. Now the fun part is the how the people playing the turtles can share certain abilities between each other.
Nice.
So, but yeah, it is fun to get in there, and it's fun to see something that is, totally dedicated. I love Gigabytes, and there's a few pretty steady people in there all the time playing different board games and whatnot. But, it's not quite the same thing as walking into like Reformation and having all the board games. Though Gigabytes does have beer now too, so maybe we will end up seeing more board gamers there.
That's very true. Now keep in mind they do have beer from Reformation Brewery there. We just need to get Stark in there, and then I'm all set. Some bottles of Declaration. That's what makes me happy. But yeah, so I mean, that's definitely something that we were mentioning, is it helps, is that community. And Brad, is there anything that you wanted to see shift, or anything that you want to see happen a little bit differently with the way that it's run, or maybe evolve a little bit?
No, I think we're heading that direction now. I mean, I think what you and Josh have done by theming the nights, and there's so many ways that you can grow that, and whether it's around game mechanics, or maybe it's around a contest of some sort. I think there's a lot of ways to start theming the game nights to create certain special experiences instead of just show up with a stack of games and play them. And I do think there's a lot of value to keep doing that mixed in as well. But I think it's on the right path. I mean, I can see it continuing to grow. One thing we've tried as a brewery is to take that experience and do it at someone else's location. And Josh and I have had this conversation. We've had some mixed success with it. One night we did a beer pairing with our beer and a specific board game at the Rook and Pawn, which is a gaming beer pub in Athens, Georgia, which is a couple hours away from where we're located. So we tried to export our game night and mix into their gaming crowd, and I think we had pretty good success at that one. And we've tried it a couple of other times with some local spots with mixed results, and I think there's more to that as well. If we can do it at our place, once a month, why can't we do it at a local bar and take games there? And if our beer's on tap, like you said, at Gigabytes, like there's opportunities to partner with other local accounts or bars or restaurants to create that community experience for them as well.
Right. So speaking of which, I guess this is the prime segue to talk about weekly games. And Josh, what you plan on doing with your version of the game store.
Right. I agree. So what we want to do with weekly games is we want to bring the gaming experience to where we believe currently congregating. New gamers, the curious gamers, the people who are hearing about this either through their friends or, you may be watching Orphan Black and you may be seeing, these cast members and these board games inside of the story there. And so, they're getting everywhere, and you just might want to understand what's happening. What Weekly Games wants to do is be able to not only bring the experience of connecting individuals around the board gaming experience, but also allow them to be able to then purchase those games that they've just played, that they've just learned, that they just had an amazing time playing with their friends, with their family. That's what we want to do. We want to take the game store mobile, if you will.
Right. I think the term that you and I were kind of talking about when you mentioned is kind of the game store food truck edition.
Exactly. Feed where we'll be next. That's exactly the idea that we're talking about.
Right. So, and that's actually come with its own set of challenges. And again, a lot of that is because of the fact that in a way you're bucking the industry norm. In the same way that like the game night kind of bucks the industry norm, where it's like, okay, people are not just playing at game stores anymore, or they're not just playing in their basements. They want to go out and they want to analog game and they want to do it in a social way.
Exactly. We want to be able to facilitate that for them where they are and where they feel most comfortable.
Right. So we do have a lot of listeners that are, kind of dipping their toe into the industry, and some folks that, we have a lot of our listeners that, have been previous guests or, that are, I don't want to say new to the industry, but they're definitely on more of the independent side. What are some of the difficulties that you've run into with getting weekly games up and running?
Challenge is that I don't a normal brick and mortar store, and I don't look like an online retailer. So I fit none of the curves of what the board game publishers are expecting, or even the distributors are expecting me to look like. So end up looking like is of dollars on setting up an LLC and want to buy games like at dirt cheap prices, apparently.
Right. You kind of look, so the one thing you and I talked about is that you kind of look like one of the, a board game collective, which is, it's basically, for lack of better terms, a group of people that get together to say that they own some organization just to get games at dirt cheap prices and get them cheaper than anywhere else on the planet, really. Right.
And that has opened my eyes because I did not know that was a thing. And so experiencing this, trying to talk to the people at ANA, talking to the people at CMON Games, talking to the distributors, trying to explain, what we're doing, that we are indeed very passionate in the board game experience to people, which is what they believe that the friendly local game store is all about. So, we are almost challenging them to say, well, if that's really what you're about, then support this new model, support this new idea.
Right. Which is tough right now with the way that the industry has been kind of swinging, like I kind of mentioned at the beginning of the podcast.
Yes, it is not without its challenges on either side. And I think it is an ongoing conversation that will continue to evolve. And I'm very excited to be on the forefront of that conversation with the industry.
Right. So So with all that being said, I know you're starting to make the headway to kind of get to where you want to get to, but do you already kind of have like your circuit planned out as to how you will go about traveling around and selling the games, or is that still something that's a little up in the air?
Still something that we're developing right now. Brad has been very instrumental in helping me understand some of the best ways to go about this. We definitely want to continue our partnership with Reformation Brewery. And as Brad mentioned earlier, Reformation Brewery want to continue to export this very successful game night that we've had at the brewery in the keeping room to other locations. We feel like we can do that, and we feel like the partnership together can make that happen. And how that exactly looks is still yet to be seen, but we're confident it can happen.
Nice. So yeah, and I'm definitely looking forward to it too, because I'm a firm believer that, you know, things are going to evolve and they're going to change, and you have to be able to adapt. And I think you're moving in the right direction to get the games out there to people on a much more personal level. You know, the biggest complaint we always hear about online sales is that they don't have that personal touch like you would get if you walk into a store and talk to a specialist. Well, in a way, you're kind of bringing the specialist to them. They don't have to come to you. So that
is a very well put way to describe that. Yeah.
Yeah. So you're taking the typical model and you're flipping it.
Right. We're going to you. We don't want you to come to us. We want to go to you.
Right. Which is awesome. And I think it's something that'll definitely work out. And so as far as that goes, I mean, I know that you're getting everything hammered out. When do you think you'll see it up and running?
We are targeting a September launch right now. We're partnering with some of the smaller publishers right now, and not necessarily. We're trying to partner with publishers who also aren't going through distribution channels, so they're self-distributing. Keymaster Games is a fantastic partner of both Weekly Games, and they're fans of Reformation Brewery as well. So we're excited to be able to be launching with that available to the public. The brand new game from Keymaster Games is Campy Creatures. We're looking forward to that. So September, come hell or high water, we're definitely launching, and you'll be able to buy that fantastic game through Weekly Games for sure.
Nice. Yeah, I'm definitely looking forward to that. So as far as the future of obviously, you know, that we're still going strong with the pairing of certain beers with certain types of games. We're sticking with themes. We're trying to get Brad to actually start running some D&D games for a change. Get out of that damn closet. And so, you know, we definitely want to see it grow. One of the things that I know I mentioned this last week that, you know, is probably very, very, very ambitious, but I would love to see a miniatures gaming night. Just because of the fact that, like, we've had people dip their toes in the RPG side of, you know, where it's like, you know, to them it was kind of intimidating. And, you know, now we've got people that are playing RPGs and love it because of that. And Brad, I know I got you and Logan involved with my game, Thantis. Logan fell in love with it to the point to where he was making, like, stuff out of foam, and he made cork models just so he could keep playing it.
Yeah. We were cutting styrofoam, making cork little miniatures, and drawing faces on them so we could play your game. Yeah, definitely. I could see that night being a big hit.
Yeah, especially if we, you know, partnering with Nick, you know, possibly partnering with Gigabytes, and making sure that we get like if we're going to do it, we have to do it right. Like, this is something that I've always kind of said, you know, especially with something like this, go big or go home, which means that we're bringing fully painted miniatures, fully painted terrain. Like, just everything's going to be done to the nines, and just let people walk in and see that visual spectacle that is wargaming, and then make them realize it's like, yes, guys, there's a lot to this, but it is amazing when you get into it. It's similar to your role-playing games, where it's like you have to be invested in it. And I'm not talking just financially. I'm talking about the fact that it's like painting miniatures takes time. When you finish those miniatures and put them on the table, like, that's something you're proud of. You know, you own it. And so, you know, showing people that there's a lot more to it than just, you know, your typical board games. And not that this is a bad thing, but a lot of board games are looked at as fire and forget. You open that box, everything you need is there to play. You open it up, you punch out the pieces. If there's pieces that need to be punched, you play the game, it goes back in the box, and you pick it up 6 weeks later. and showing that there's games out there where there is a little bit more, I guess, dedication is a good word. D&D is a prime example of that. You want to have that weekly game night or bi-weekly game night. If you're the dungeon master, you have to be working on the next set of adventures or the next arc in your campaign. As the player, you have to think, it's like, okay, how would my character really act? What would he do in these kind of situations? And, you're always kind of going back to that place with RPGs and wargaming.
Yeah, I see that as a natural fit, and I do think that our gaming community is ready to explore that and understand it and see if it's for them or not.
Yeah, I mean, Nick and I have been doing quite a bit with the miniature scene lately, especially we've been doing a lot with the guys over at Firelock Games with Blood and Plunder. We've gone from playing a ton of your traditional like high fantasy games, and now we are so crazy into the whole historical pirates thing. It's been insane.
Which is funny because most of the time gamers don't, either they're, fantasy or science fiction, there might be a little back and forth there, but then historicals is, that crowd over there. And that's how it goes. Historicals are somewhere over there. Go over there, but yeah, especially with pirates is fun because A, it's pirates, and B, even if it is historical, they were pirates. They didn't match. So, you don't have to worry about as much authenticity, which is usually where historical gamers get into it.
Yeah, definitely.
Sorry, I just cut you off there, Josh.
No, I was just going to say, I think if someone let me borrow their French army, I could beat either one of you, is what I think.
Oh, and we're already getting the call-outs. We are already getting the call-outs.
And he's calling the French. I mean, geez.
Yeah, wow. I think you overspoke there, Josh.
Guess
you done did it now.
Now, I will plug my own event on the 26th of August at Gigabytes Cafe, which carries Reformation beer. I mean, this is just like a glorious month right now. There is going to be from 11 to 4. It's a Blood and Plunder day at Gigabytes. It's on a Saturday, and it's gonna be a 6-foot by 12-foot table. So, I mean that just puts some of that out there for you.
That's huge, by the way. That's a lot of table going on, but. Yeah, we're definitely looking forward to that event. And I think that we could run something very similar to that at Reformation and still have people get involved, even if they've never played miniatures before.
Oh, easily.
Especially when they see the pirate ships.
Pirate ships always win people over. It's a known fact.
Yeah, it's so we're definitely looking forward to doing some more stuff like that. But Brad, Josh, I know you and I have been talking quite a bit about doing some more. Of the, I guess you want to call it the investment gaming opportunities, such as role playing and miniature wargaming, and I think we are starting to reach that point. I've been kind of throwing out feelers to see how people would respond to it, because I definitely don't want to make an event to where people feel like, oh, well, that's something it looks far too intimidating. Like, I definitely don't want to come out of the woodwork with it and make it like some giant mega, hyper structured event. I think we have to find a good balance on how to approach that.
Wargaming is more accessible than people realize, and again, as we continue to bring up this idea of intimidation, it feels intimidating. You've got the measuring tape, you've got a rule set you may or may not be familiar with. So I think the more we can do as a group of individuals, we can continue to introduce people to new gaming experiences that they, again, would not or may not have had otherwise.
Right. And I think that's the key, especially when we are talking about your non-traditional gaming forums, such as Reformation, where we are talking about the fact that, people are already there to be social. So give them a reason to try something new.
Exactly.
Yes. So I think for that one, we need to have a special beer for that night. That definitely has
That's
to
the next
happen.
thing, we're working on. We got to have a special, game night beer for sure.
So, Brad, are you able to talk right now about some of the new brews that you guys have coming out?
Yeah, so the state of Georgia is always behind. I know I'm sure you got listeners all over the country, but the state of Georgia, for those who don't know, in beer terms, are still stuck behind prohibition laws and have never been able to sell beer directly to the consumer. So even though these people come to game night, they really are technically buying a tour, and I use air quotes on that tour, and explore the facility and learn about how beer is made and get free samples of beer. And that's like a shell game that the state of Georgia has run for decades at local breweries. And that changes September 1st. And we finally get to join the modern world of direct-to-consumer sales at the source. So it's a big deal for breweries. And Reformation is going to do that by releasing a brand new beer on September 1st. It's going to be a honey double IPA that you can only buy on site. And you will be able to take it home in 16-ounce can format as well. So we're going to celebrate by just giving more choice and new products to the consumer and let them buy direct. And I think that's going to be the first of a series of beers that we're calling the Pioneer Series, that we just make one-off specialty batches like this. This honey was actually from a local beekeeper that she raised in the hive and shared the honey with us. So those kind of special experiences we'll keep investing in for the Pioneer Series going forward.
Awesome. Yeah, I'm definitely looking forward to that one. So, and again, like for us, there is an excitement. Nick comes from more of your way upstate, practically Canada, New York. I come from Wisconsin, and, you and I have talked quite a bit about this, about the fact that, the very first few times that Dana and I went to Reformation, you guys were actually the first or I guess you want to call it the craft brewery that we went to, micro brew, craft brew, whatever you want to call it, that we're so used to Wisconsin law where, in Wisconsin, like, oh yeah, we have our own, microbrewery here. Just buy what you want and drink it here. And, you want to take some home, bring in your growler. Cool. We'll get you taken care of. And we get here and we're like, what is this tour thing? What is this? We got to hand you tickets and you have to punch out dots. And
it's crazy. And finally all that goes away. And, the consumer has the power now and not the politicians. And that's always a good thing for everyone.
Yeah, it's going to be amazing. I'm definitely looking forward to it just because I've always felt like, everything that goes on down here with beer in Georgia is just blasphemy to begin with. But
we're slowly setting beer free.
That's good. Yeah. So, we're definitely looking forward to that, but we got to do something big for that. Something big for that game night. Josh, what do you have in mind? You got any ideas you kind of want to hint at yet, or nothing just yet?
We have some plans. It is going to be a fantastic night of gaming. We were talking to some folks who develop games up in the Columbus area. Don't want to drop any names quite yet, but so we're looking towards the social deduction side. So we're looking at maybe running a big 2 rooms and a boom game, some werewolf, something to get the entire room playing together would be fantastic.
Okay, cool. So definitely something that's I guess larger party game scale.
Yeah, exactly.
Perfect. Awesome. So guys, we're coming to the end of the podcast. So why don't we take a couple minutes? Brad, why don't we start with you? Talk a little about Reformation, where they can reach Reformation, Twitter, Facebook, all that good stuff. And then Josh, we'll go ahead and do the same with you for weekly games.
Yeah, Reformation Brewery is on all the social. Just search for Reformation Brewery and reformationbrewery.com if you want to have a starting place, and click on any icon you want. But Reformation Brewery is located in Woodstock, Georgia. We're just north of Atlanta and in the huge metropolitan area, easily accessible. And we're open Wednesday through Sunday to the public, and we're open the second Tuesday of every month for the gamers in the community. So come join us.
Awesome. Josh, why don't you go ahead and plug yourself there a little bit, talk about the podcast, weekly games, and what you kind of have planned?
we're launching a podcast that talks about the gaming, the psychology of gaming, why we game, the deeper stuff that comes into the gaming life. We're discussing digital, analog, video games. Catch that at What's the Scenario. But also weekly-games.com is the new gaming stores that we hope to be launching and changing the world. So you can check that out at weekly-games.com. Sign up for our newsletter and be the first to hear about all the fantastic news coming out as soon as it happens.
Excellent. Well, guys, I want to thank you so much for coming on. It's been a blast talking with you, and hopefully we get a chance to do this again. I would love to do some live recordings from some people's experiences while we're there at Reformation for some of the game nights. And Nick, is there anything else you want to throw out there real quick before we sign this puppy off?
No, I think I hit it, the 26th.
Blood and Plunder.
Blood and Plunder. I can't, I know I'm going to think about 10 things in like 2 minutes, so.
Yeah, we'll already be off the air at that point, so I guess you're kind of shit out of luck on that one, aren't you?
I am. Have a good night, everybody.
All right, folks, thanks for joining us. We'll see you next time. Thanks for listening to another episode of Skirmish Supremacy. To see more of the antics that Nick and I do, you can check us out on Facebook at Skirmish Supremacy. We also have Twitter, which we can be reached at Skirmish Supreme, because apparently Skirmish Supremacy does not fit in Twitter. And if you want to email us directly, you can reach us at tim@skirmishsupremacy.com or nick@skirmishsupremacy.com. Thanks for listening.